We all know some iconic symbols. The Statue of Liberty screams USA. The Eiffel Tower represents Paris. And this mask? Undoubtedly, it's Tutankhamun's, right? Sometimes it feels like historians have squeezed every last drop out of the King Tut story. But guess what? The most obvious details often slip right under our noses. Like the fact that this famous mask didn't actually belong to him, nor was it ever meant for him. Stick with me for the details. Can we get a close-up of that mask? Thanks. See those holes? Yep, they're for earrings. And no, it's not that they had anything against jewelry, but back in ancient Egypt, earrings were typically worn by high-status women or kids. Now, if you know your history, you might say, but Tut was a boy king, wasn't he? You're spot on. He began his reign at just 9 years old. Sadly, that didn't last long as he passed away at a very young age. So when he was 9, he might have worn earrings, but he probably took them off when he hit that no earrings age. Sounds reasonable, right? Actually, not quite. That would have been pretty strange since nobody expected him to pass away young. Certainly not at 9. So no one was preparing a kid's mask for a burial. It's this untimely demise that suggests that the mask used was simply the best option available when Tut passed away. There are more clues pointing to the idea that the mask was found in a hurry. Let's think about this. Even though Tut was mummified and his body could wait a bit, his loved ones wanted him to reach the afterlife ASAP. Some experts even believe the paint in the tomb was still wet when it was sealed. But look at his mask. It's a masterpiece. There's no way it was made in a rush. It's way more elaborate than other simpler cartonnage pieces. The renowned mask of King Tut stands 21 inches tall, adorned with precious stones, and features a golden beard that weighs 5.5 pounds, making the entire mask 22.5 pounds. Okay, I'm a bit confused here. So it seems like it was probably a kid's mask, but it had a beard? I've never seen a 9-year-old with a goatee, and I'm guessing you haven't either. Just think about it. A grown man's face compared to a kid's face. Fun fact for you, our faces pretty much stopped growing at the age of 16, so by 19, Tut would have definitely had the face of an adult man. Can you imagine trying to fit a relatively small kid's mask on a grown man? That would have been super embarrassing, and no one would have let that happen. Right, let's dismiss the kids theory. Now, the second option, if you remember, is that the mask could have originally belonged to a woman. This is where the beard theory comes into play. Some researchers believe the beard might have been added later on. Here's another twist. What if the mask was actually made for Nefertiti herself, who ended up maskless? In this case, there are two discoveries. Two birds with one stone. For now, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, I know. But let's give it a shot and delve deeper into the details. So, Tut passed away in around 1323 BCE, probably due to malaria. He had other health issues too, like when he broke his leg, and records suggest he wasn't in the best shape. As for Nefertiti, we have no solid data about her demise. Plus, nobody knows exactly when or where she was buried. The supposed year when she passed away is around 1330 BCE, but she could have lived longer, and the mask was intended and prepared for her. Or maybe they just took her mask right from the burial chamber. After all, they were family. Well, sort of. She was said to be his stepmom, having been married to Akhenaten, who was likely Tut's father. But this is not 100% accurate. Some scientists doubt it. Ah, these ancient Egyptian families. It's hard to keep track of who's who. I know, you're not yet convinced that Tut wore a lady's mask. Let me share one more theory with you. Meet Howard Carter, the enthusiastic archaeologist who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. It was located in the Valley of Kings outside Luxor, and, to everyone's surprise, was nearly intact. When he entered, he noticed something odd. This didn't feel like a pharaoh's burial chamber. It was classy and all, but it had a vibe that suggested it was made for a woman. Typically, Egyptian pharaohs had larger tombs that suited them better, and even more strangely, it was oriented to the right of the entrance. This didn't add up. That orientation was typical for female chambers, which Egyptian queens used. Another red flag was that the chamber appeared to have been built in stages, and all the artifacts, around 2,000 of them, seemed hastily placed there. Even more curious, they looked like they were meant for other royals. Carter discovered this burial site in 1922, but it remained a mystery as to why it was so bizarre. Almost a century later, Nicholas Reeves thought he may have solved the puzzle. He claimed that King Tut might not have been the original resident of the tomb. Instead, he suggested that the undisturbed resting place of the legendary Queen Nefertiti could be hidden behind the walls of the boy king's burial chamber. Nicholas studied high-resolution photos for months, meticulously examining every pixel. One day, he focused on detailed scans that revealed the texture of the tomb's walls beneath layers of paint. He spotted what he believed to be outlines of two doorways that had been blocked and plastered over to hide them from view. The more he looked, the more it seemed real. Could it be a tomb within a tomb? Nicholas theorized there was a hidden storeroom behind the western wall of King Tut's tomb, and his chamber might just be the outermost section of a larger corridor-style network of rooms. It all sounds fancy, but sorry to break it to you, Reeves' theory was debunked. To find out if he was onto something, experts had to use ground-penetrating radar to see the unseen. Reeves' idea was that if there were gaps, it could indicate the presence of additional rooms. And at first, in 2015, one expert even thought he had found a hidden room. But the glory didn't last for long. A year later, after double-checking, it turned out there were no hidden doorways. By the way, Nefertiti isn't the only legendary woman from Egypt whose burial site remains a captivating mystery. There's a cool legend about Cleopatra that you might enjoy. It's said that she once declared, "No man will ever find my tomb." Kind of fitting, right? After all, the person who's come closest to uncovering her final resting place is a woman. Fast forward a few millennia after she passed away, and while no man has located it, archaeologist Kathleen Martinez believes she might have cracked the code. She's been on the quest for Cleopatra VII's tomb for nearly 20 years, and recently discovered a bust that she thinks represents the famous queen. However, not everyone is on board with her claim. Some experts argue that the bust doesn't resemble Cleopatra at all. Alongside this intriguing marble statue, Martinez's team also unearthed 337 coins, some of which, less controversially, feature Cleopatra's likeness. But the real part is that it's still not officially confirmed. There's no doubt about the existence of the small bust. It's carved from white marble, fits in one hand, and shows a woman wearing a royal crown, according to a translated statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. The big question, though, is who it actually depicts. While Martinez insists this statue is a representation of Queen Cleopatra VII, many other archaeologists argue that the facial features don't match, suggesting it likely belongs to a princess instead. Sorry, I can't resist the temptation of breaking the magic for a moment. Some folks believe that the whole idea of "no man will find my tomb" is misunderstood. Even if she did say it, what she probably meant was "no living soul," and it wasn't about gender at all. It can as well be just a beautiful legend. Toodaloo!
So looky here, scientists discovered ancient artifacts near King Tut's tomb. Turns out, his VIP final resting place looks more like a public graveyard with about a dozen wooden coffins that's been there for around 3,600 years. Okay, I might have exaggerated a tad. The 11 tombs weren't exactly right next to King Tut, but they were close, near the same city of Luxor. New findings in Egyptian tombs can help us piece together what life was like in ancient Egypt. And guess what? Ancient Egyptians seem to have been remarkably like us, modern humans. Say, the women have always loved jewelry, and archaeologists retrieved a beautifully made necklace with 30 amethyst beads and 2 agate beads, plus a hippo head amulet. Bet it was all the rage back then. Researchers also discovered 2 copper mirrors. One had a handle shaped like a lotus, and the other was decorated with Hathor, the ancient Egyptian deity of the sky, women, fertility, and love. These recent excavations near Tutankhamun's burial site led to another jaw-dropping revelation. For the first time in thousands of years, fragments of Queen Hatshepsut's Valley Temple were uncovered. This fearless woman was thought to be the second female pharaoh, who ruled with both courage and wisdom, leaving a legacy as solid as the stones themselves. Her temple, hidden for ages, opens a window into a time filled with power, intrigue, and spiritual devotion. Archaeologists found over 1,000 beautifully decorated stone blocks on the outskirts of Hatshepsut's funerary temple. There were very few women who managed to take the throne in ancient Egypt. Another tomb was found nearby, and it belonged to the overseer of Queen Teti Sheri's palace, whose name was Jehuti-Mez. Queen Hatshepsut seems to have even more tombs, aces up her sleeve. These tombs were carved into the rock instead of being built as pyramids, showing a unique ancient perspective on how to protect the soul in the afterlife. Experts managed to retrieve some cool ancient pieces from the site. Toys made of clay, mummy masks, winged scarabs, and some amulets. Sadly, there surely used to be way more artifacts, but over the last centuries, there have been people other than archaeologists to stumble upon this site. It's likely that looters got to these tombs before them and may have taken some valuable items. But they did leave behind some cool stuff for the researchers, like pottery used for offerings of bread and meat, along with archers' bows that connect the tomb's owners to the Egyptian military. Meanwhile, soul protection is way more important than you might think, especially if you're roaming around Luxor looking for ancient secrets. You aren't scared of King Tut's curse, are you? Let me tell you what happened to those who weren't scared, but promise me to take it with a dash of salt, okay? For years, Egyptologists, especially those who believed in paranormal activity, were convinced that there was an unsettling curse surrounding Tutankhamun's archaeological discoveries. This belief stemmed from the mysterious and untimely demise of several excavators who discovered the tomb in 1922 with no logical explanation for why they passed away. It was just easier to chalk it up to something supernatural and avoid the whole mess. But it turns out it wasn't a curse at all. It was likely the radiation that caused those excavators to perish. Now, you might wonder where the radiation came from. After all, while radioactivity was discovered in the 19th century, ancient Egyptians, despite their impressive pyramids, didn't have any radium lying around to make Tut's tomb glow like crazy. So, what could be the real story? It might have been toxic waste behind it all. Toxic levels of radiation from uranium and hazardous waste have been lurking inside the tomb since it was sealed over 3,000 years ago. The burial chamber of Tutankhamun's tomb reportedly has such high radiation levels that anyone who steps inside could easily end up with a fatal dose of radiation sickness or an incurable condition. By the way, you can have a somewhat similar level of radioactivity if you don't get rid of those moldy dinner leftovers you left to perish in your fridge a month ago. But this radioactivity isn't exclusive to Tutankhamun's tomb. Ancient Egyptian artifacts discovery is rewarding yet dangerous due to unusually high radiation levels in Old Kingdom tombs all over Egypt. Geiger counters have detected radiation at 2 sites near the Giza pyramids, and radon, a radioactive gas, has been found in several underground tombs in Saqqara. Interestingly, experts believe that the builders of these ancient tombs were aware of the toxins, as some eerie warnings were carved into the walls of many tombs. One inscription ominously declared, "They that break this tomb shall meet their end by a malady that no doctor can diagnose." Other ominous phrases like "forbidden," "due to evil spirits," only added to the fear that supernatural curses haunted these ancient sites. Ominous signs have stunned archaeologists since forever, but the fear grew even stronger a century ago with the mysterious passing of Lord Carnarvon, who funded King Tut's excavation in 1922 and reportedly explored the treasure-filled rooms, along with several others who entered the tomb. Arthur Weigall, another British Egyptologist, who was present at the tomb's opening and is credited with starting the curse myth, passed away young when he was just in his 50s in 1934. Chances are the condition that made him pass was connected to radiation. In total, 6 out of the 26 people who were there when the tomb was opened met their end within a decade from various causes. Not only X-ray exposure, those reasons include asphyxia, stroke, heart failure, pneumonia, and even poisoning. Well, isn't this getting a little grim? There was one guy who opened the tomb and somehow managed to avoid the infamous curse, Howard Carter, or so it seemed. Some folks pointed to his survival as proof that the curse wasn't real. After digging up the tomb, Carter published several books on the topic and shifted gears from archaeology to dealing in antiquities for various museums. Despite dodging demise or injury, rumors swirled about how the curse may have impacted him in other ways. One of the big stories linked him to Lord Carnarvon's daughter, Evelyn. Some said he was madly in love with her, but she married someone else, so he chose to stay single. Others claimed they had an affair while she was in Egypt, which ended when her father passed away and she left the country for good. However, there wasn't much evidence to support these stories. Evelyn was just 6 when they met, and they remained friends until his last breath. She was even one of the few attendees at his funeral, but denied any romantic involvement, saying they weren't that close. A year after the revolutionary discovery near King Tut's tomb, Evelyn married politician Sir Brograve Beauchamp and had a daughter. That same year, Beauchamp toured the tomb with his parents, guided by Carter himself. Carter never married and, aside from those posthumous rumors about Evelyn, had no other romantic connections. While the curse adds an intriguing twist to his life story, his tendency to keep relationships at arm's length was evident long before the tomb was opened. It seemed Carter just wasn't a people person. In 1939, after battling a serious illness, he ultimately succumbed to fate. He was 64, which was a pretty common life expectancy in the UK back then, so no one really thought it was off and linked it to an ancient curse. When he passed, it turned out he had several artifacts from Tutankhamun's tomb in his London apartment, which were eventually sent back to Egypt, marking what some viewed as the curse's end. Who knows? Maybe if he hadn't had all those ancient souvenirs at his place, he would have lived way longer. But all the other demises might seem off. The curse theory was likely fueled by some strange events during the excavation. Carnarvon got a mosquito bite that became severely infected, and around the time they opened the tomb, Cairo experienced a bizarre power outage in a freak sandstorm. Back in England, the Earl's dog, Susie, managed to escape from Carnarvon's house and began barking frantically at seemingly nothing. At least that's what the staff and family saw. Strangely enough, at the very moment her owner's heart stopped, Susie started howling and fell down without showing any signs of life. Maybe radiation didn't play a crucial role after all, and those were indeed ancient artifacts from King Tut's tomb that made them all perish. Spooky, huh?
And we love the thrill and fun we get from the games like Monopoly and Taboo. But what did people play hundreds of years ago? Surprisingly, some of these games are still played today, and you can buy their replicas. Let me know which is your favorite at the end of the video. Let's start with one of the oldest board games in the world, the Royal Game of Ur. Also called the Game of 20 Squares, was invented around 4,600 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. The game was rediscovered when the excavation started in the 1920s in the Royal Cemetery of Ur in modern-day Iraq. The game wasn't only played by royals. People from all social classes enjoyed this 2-player strategy race game. It was popular all over the Middle East, but its fame reached other places like Sri Lanka. Okay, Brightside, tell me how this game is played. It's similar to backgammon. People competed to get all their pieces from one part of the board to the other. To win this board game, you need to have a strategy, but also you needed luck. Besides entertainment, this game had a special importance regarding fortune-telling. The events in the game were believed to mirror the player's future. According to this belief, the game transferred messages from deities or supernatural beings through the moves in the central squares. How come people stopped playing this game? Well, the game evolved with time, and then it was replaced with other board games. Senet is a board game from ancient Egypt dating to around 3100 BCE. The objective of the game is to take all of your pieces off the board. You get 4 or 5 colored pieces. Then you use Senet sticks as dice. Players take turns. There are special rules on how and when you can move your pieces. For example, if you throw the sticks and get one face-up stick, you can move one space, but also get an extra turn. Archaeologists discovered Senet boxes in the ancient Egyptians' tombs. The Egyptians believed in an afterlife, and the word Senet means passing. That's why the game was also associated with the journey to the other side. So it was more than a game, sort of a symbol for the struggle to reach eternity. The game was played and admired by Tutankhamun and Queen Nefertari. It's no secret that the ancient Egyptians loved parties. If you'd been invited to a feast held by a person from the upper class, you would have seen musicians, jugglers, and wrestlers waiting to entertain you. You would have probably spotted some people playing Senet too. On the original board, you would have seen squares decorated with hieroglyphs representing additional rules of the game. Some models in our modern-day replicas also have such hieroglyphs. So far, we've looked at 2-player games. Now, let's look at a fun 4-player game. Mahjong originated in the Qing dynasty in China. But the world record for the longest game, which was set in 2012 when the game was played for 33 hours, doesn't belong to the Chinese. But the biggest Mahjong party did happen in China. 2,380 people were playing the game at the same time. In this game, the player's goal is to form melds with tiles to get points. The highest scored player will be the winner. The winner should form a mahjong. The tiles are traditionally decorated with Chinese characters, bamboo branches, and dots. There are more special tiles that have symbols like dragons and flowers on them, and they serve different purposes. The game resembles rummy, a card game. Mahjong became popular in Western countries in the 19th century, and now you can find different versions of the game all around the world and online. Moving on to India. Krita Patram is an ancient card game. Handmade round cards are made out of cloth pieces. The cards are decorated with depictions of Ramayana and Mahabharata, which are India's greatest epics. So much so that they influenced the way of thinking and the belief system in the region. The game was played in the royal courts, but later it's believed to have been played by people from other social classes too. Before the game starts, a player assembles the cards into a deck and shuffles them to randomize the order. Let's return to ancient Egypt, but this time we'll have a look at a game that can be played by up to 6 people. Mehen got its name from a serpentine deity. It was played roughly between 3100 BCE and 2300 BCE. It's a board game in the shape of a coiled snake. The snake's body is divided into small rectangular zones. And yes, it's a snake game, but not similar to the one on old Nokia phones. Egyptologists say that this game is kind of a mystery because the rules and scoring system of Mehen is unknown. What they do know is that the game was played with sphere-shaped tokens. The players started the game from the tail and headed towards the head of the serpent, which was in the middle. The players had to race to get to the center. Additional lion-shaped gaming pieces added a little spice to the competition. The players had to strategically maneuver their pawns to special formations called blockades. There were some opportunities along the way for players to speed up the process through slides and jumps. This game had something in common with Senet, the other Egyptian game we've spoken about. Here too, the players had sticks to throw on the table, but instead of 2 colors, they had flat and round sides. Ludus Latroncalorum, aka Latrones, is a 2-player board game from the Roman Empire. The aim of the game is to test the military prowess of the players. It's played on grids. The precise rules of the game remain a mystery, though many scholars have worked on several reconstructions of Latrones. Among multiple interpretations of the rules, one explanation is widely accepted. It suggests that players moved pieces in all directions, aiming to surround and isolate the opponent's pieces with their own. Captured tokens were then moved away from the board. This game resembles chess or draughts in terms of the rules, but this one is more about military tactics. Luckily, the famous Roman poet Ovid mentioned this game in his poems, and we learned some of the rules thanks to his poems. I guess Ovid was a fan of game nights. I'd love to see what a game night looked like back then. Another strategy game from the Roman Empire is Nine Men's Morris. This long-forgotten board game was rediscovered in 2018 during excavations. It originated in 1400 BCE. In this game, rivals control their armies that consist of 9 men. Each piece represents different qualities on the grid-like playing field. If your opponent cannot form a mill or lose all their pieces but 2, then you become the winner. In Norway, France, Germany, and many other countries, especially in medieval Europe, there were different variations of Nine Men's Morris. Interestingly, Shakespeare mentioned it in his famous comedy, A Midsummer Night's Dream. The next game is Wari. It's also known as Mancala. It became popular in West Africa and then spread to the rest of the world. Here, 2 players want to beat each other by planning their moves. This game requires mental skills and lots of practice. In other words, wearing your lucky t-shirt won't help you win the game. Each player has 6 holes filled with seeds and a bank to collect the seeds. As a player, you want to get the seeds of your opponent. There are detailed rules for how you can collect the seeds, of course. You can play this game at home. Instead of seeds, you can use any small objects, like pebbles, marbles, or even M&Ms. Do you think these games will still be around 1,000 years from now? Chess, for instance, has made it this far, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
In 1975, in Puerto Rico, a farmer saw most of his goats lying lifeless on the ground. He got closer and saw that the animals were stiff and had 2 puncture marks on their necks. Goats were not the only animals that were hurt. Many pigs, cows, and geese lost their lives too. They all had the same distinctive bite marks on their necks, and all had been drained of their vital fluids. The locals immediately jumped to conclusions and blamed dogs, and the authorities didn't bother to do a better investigation and just said dogs had done it without looking for any proof. A couple of days later, though, many more animals were found deceased. Among them was a cow that had literally been opened, and it had a lot of scratches on its head. The farmer next door reported that his chickens had been destroyed by something. In just a few weeks, the creature took the lives of 90 farm animals. After some time, another farmer said that 10 of his goats had been drained, 7 had been hurt, and 11 were missing. This time, the authorities didn't waste any time and started the monster hunt, but they had no luck finding the culprit. The incident was all over the local newspaper, and the beast was named the Vampire of Mocha. The incident caught the attention of the Agricultural Commission, and scientist Juan Rivera was tasked to solve this otherworldly mystery. His first suspect was a Puerto Rican boa. This non-venomous snake can grow to be a little over 6 feet. Still, its diet consists of only small prey. It's also very shy of humans and other animals. It avoids bigger creatures at all costs. You're more likely to see fish climbing trees than this boa taking down a whole cow. Near the crime scene, a large cave was discovered, and we all know that weird creatures like living in dark, cold caves. In the cave, they found some crazy-looking bats. As we've seen in movies, bats can turn into vampires, so they must be the culprit. But no, bats were as innocent as they could be. Their favorite food wasn't cows or goats, it was figs. They were peaceful fruit-eating bats that didn't care about animals. Again, the researcher hit a wall. Suddenly, all the terror stopped in July 1975. It seemed like the creature had vanished into thin air, but not for long. 2 decades later, 62 miles from the previous site, more animals were found. A local vet examined them. He was terrified to discover that every animal had 2 precisely cut holes like he had never seen before. The animals were anemic and looked like they'd passed away recently. By the looks of it, the creature's favorite food was goats, and that's how it got the infamous name we all heard of, chupacabra, which means the goat sucker. Dogs, chickens, rabbits, and other animals were not off the menu. In short time, the chupacabra took 1,000 farm animals. Now, this animal had a name,
But people still had zero idea about what the chupacabra looked like, which was terrifying. In Canovanas, Madeline and her mother reported seeing a weird creature that could have been the chupacabra. They said it had been walking on two legs like a human and resembled a kangaroo. They mentioned that the monster also had spikes on the back, no ears, large dark eyes, and 2 holes for a nose. It had 2 arms with 3 fingers. The chupacabra seemed to like Madeline's house because her husband and his coworker found it in the garage. They tried to capture it but didn't succeed. Madeline later drew a detailed sketch of it. Many people saw the sketch and reported seeing a similar creature. They claimed it had strong legs and wings and smelled like sulfur. Take all these descriptions with a grain of salt. If they'd been true, they would have been all over the news. But still, keep in mind these descriptions. They will be important later in the story. In 1976, on some talk show, they talked about the chupacabra, and the show quickly went viral. Soon, people started reporting having seen a similar creature in Florida and Mexico. Many said that the stories were like a unicorn rodeo. They were totally made up. In Mexico, 2 skeptical inquiries, Patricia and Mario, laid traps around those farms where the chupacabra had allegedly been seen. They caught some animals in their traps, but no sign of the goat sucker. They only captured wild dogs. The police stated that the chupacabra was just a wild dog, not a mythical creature. And still, in the next 5 years, there were numerous sightings of the chupacabra worldwide. On the 13th of August of the year 2000, a farmer from Nicaragua found 25 of his sheep and 35 of his neighbor's sheep hurt. So he decided to take the matter into his own hands. One night, he was patiently waiting in the pitch-black night for the creature to appear. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw something and managed to hit it. The creature passed away. Finally, they had proof that the chupacabra was not just a fairy tale. It was a big thing. Later, the chupacabra was examined by a vet. The vet was shocked because he had no idea what the creature was. Remember Madeline's description? Well, the vet described the animal differently, but his story turned out to be more plausible. This chupacabra had large teeth, giant claws, greenish eyes, bat-like skin, and a crest sticking out of its back. The vet concluded that the animal was some kind of hybrid. They thought it was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, but it sounds like an exaggeration and is hard to believe. We all know that such a mix is impossible. They did some tests on the body at the university in Nicaragua, and the results didn't quite deliver what they had expected. The animal was a wild dog with mange. Mange is an itchy skin disease that causes dogs to lose their hair. It's also highly contagious. When a dog has mange, their skin becomes scaly and wrinkled. When they returned the body, the farmer noticed it wasn't his chupacabra. 7 years later, another body was found in Texas. Phyllis Cannon returned to her farm and noticed that some of her chickens had passed away. All seemed to be anemic. Later, she saw coyote-looking creatures that didn't have any hair. More of her animals were harmed, so she had to set up cameras on her farm. But unfortunately, like always, she didn't manage to record anything. Surprisingly, she got a call from a local farmer who had found the chupacabra hit by a car. Later, another body was found much closer to her farm. She took some pictures of the animal, and soon, those images were all over the internet. Phyllis was curious and sent 5 DNA samples to 5 different universities. The results didn't match any animal in the archives. Researchers had no idea what it was, but it wasn't a dog. Phyllis still has one animal in her freezer and a taxidermied specimen in her house. There are many theories about the chupacabra. Some claim that the animal is a genetically modified monkey that escaped the lab. Others state that it's some mysterious, otherworldly creature. The most consistent hypothesis is that the chupacabra is a mix between a Mexican wolf and a coyote with mange. Now, do you remember that Phyllis said that she had sent samples to 5 universities and no match had been found? Well, it turned out she hadn't been telling the truth.
At one university, they found that the animal was a mix between a coyote and a Mexican wolf and that it had mange. Animals with mange are weak and will likely try to hunt farm animals to survive. People, when they see something they don't know, tend to exaggerate, which is why all witnesses describe the animal differently.
Stonehenge took approximately 20 million man-hours to build. For comparison, an average human doesn't live much over 700,000 hours. This is Jack, one of the first builders of Stonehenge. Let's say Jack lived to be 80 years old, which is extremely improbable, but it makes it easier for me to crunch the numbers, thanks. If Jack had spent his entire life, from age 0 to age 80, working on the Stonehenge project, it would have required approximately 28.5 generations of people doing the same thing to complete it. That's next to impossible. To make it more plausible, let's multiply that by 2. After all, Jack wouldn't want to dedicate his entire life to moving stones, and he didn't live to be that old. Thus, we arrive at around 57 generations needed to build Stonehenge. That's not enough room on the screen for me to introduce John, Jack's great-great-great-great, you get the drift, grandson. So it all began around 5,000 years ago with just a simple circular earthen bank and ditch. Fast forward to around 26,000 BCE, and the builders replaced that initial structure with a complex arrangement of wooden posts and brought in around 80 dolerite bloom stones from Wales, which were rearranged at least 3 times. Then, a few hundred years later, they added those massive sarsen stones, each weighing around 25 tons. These enormous sandstone blocks were transported about 19 miles to create a continuous outer circle, with 5 trilithons, 2 upright stones topped with a lintel, forming a horseshoe shape inside. It was a millennium-long building process that demanded years of hard work. So, people must have lived nearby, right? But how would they have found shelter back then? Today, we have houses for builders on site, small accommodations that serve as temporary housing. But structures like this definitely didn't exist when Stonehenge was constructed, did they? Well, actually, they existed, and some recent archaeological digs near Stonehenge prove it. Archaeologists found this Stone Age eco-home, which is a huge deal since it's one of the earliest settlements in the area. This newly uncovered Mesolithic home dates back to around the year 4300 BCE. Let's take a closer look at this house, shall we? Now, for the walls, people back then used a large fallen tree, its trunk to be more precise. These wooden walls were reinforced with flint, and they even lined the pit left by the uprooted tree with cobblestones. To create the roof, they opted for animal hides, which sounds like a wise choice. They must have provided protection against the unpredictable weather of the British Isles. Now, you might be wondering, the weather in Britain is indeed unpredictable, and it has been that way since time immemorial. So, how did the builders manage throughout most of the year, particularly during the winter months? Well, the answer is simple. There was a hearth on site, which isn't surprising, but the system they employed was quite ingenious. A hearth inside the house would have posed too great a risk, yet bringing hot stones into the dwelling was perfectly safe. While they were hot, they couldn't ignite the building. So they used these stones from the hearth as a heat storage system to keep warm at night. And as a final touch, they even incorporated various stones for decoration. They didn't exactly get a Pinterest house, but it added a touch of elegance for sure. And if you think this discovery is merely about the houses, think again. It significantly changes our understanding of how people lived during that time. This discovery places them in an important prehistoric setting right at the start of the Neolithic area, sparking some interesting questions about whether these early folks could be related to the people who built Stonehenge. But there's a big worry. Experts are concerned that this significant find, along with other buried archaeological sites, could be at risk if the authorities go ahead with plans to build a tunnel to reroute the A303 away from the World Heritage Site. Sure thing the house the scientists found wasn't in perfect shape, and it lacked some crucial elements people use for living. Some of them decayed over time, while others were simply absent. So the scientists took 20 tons of chalk, 5,000 hazel rods, and 3 tons of straw, and used all this to recreate the 4,500-year-old design houses. These new buildings are located close to Stonehenge, which is incredible since in this area, planning permission for even a new cowshed is problematic. So, what are these houses like? Well, first off, there are 4 of them, and they're oval-shaped. They're built on the foundation of real houses that stood there about 4,500 years ago, just around the time the Stonehenge Eco House was going up. The houses aren't very big, they're single-room structures. When it comes to dimensions, it was straightforward to estimate since we could gauge the size of the roof and the height of the walls based on the foundations. Each side measures about 16 feet. However, the roof structure remains a bit of a mystery. There were a few differing thatching techniques back then, so pinpointing the exact method used for these dwellings is kind of a guessing game. For now, we think it involves knotted or tied straw carefully secured onto a hazel-woven frame. When fires are lit, the smoke from the hearth wafts up through the thatched roof. Now, remember those 20 tons of chalk? That was needed for the floors and walls. The white chalk walls and floors reflect sunlight and capture heat from the fire. But here's the kicker. The builders encountered a challenge because the ground was so waterlogged that some of the chalk floors took weeks to dry out. By the time they should have been bone dry, they were still as sticky as chewing gum. Now, it's safe to say people 4,500 years ago faced similar struggles, and we can really appreciate what they went through while building their homes. The final layer of daub was applied using rags, giving a smooth, almost shiny finish that looks surprisingly classy. The interiors are furnished with wooden and wicker beds and shelves, along with clay pots and jars, all centered around a cozy hearth. The spaces feel surprisingly roomy and are filled with light that streams in through the thatched roof, bouncing off those white walls. Plus, the woven furniture adds a nice touch of authenticity to the vibe. The fires have been lit, and the first meal, bread crafted from flour ground on a stone mill next to the hearth, has been prepared. Those who tried the bread were pleasantly surprised by its flavor, finding it quite tasty. Now, here comes the bummer. Those who recreated the houses did cheat a little. While the materials used were authentic, the tools weren't. They used cement mixers to mix the daub, wheelbarrows to transport the timber, and logs by the hearth were split with steel axes instead of stone ones. Still, the builders aren't professionals, they're volunteers. So I think a bit of cheating is totally cool in this case. There are other volunteers on site who are more than happy to chat about the daily activities of the Stonehenge builders, from grinding grain with a quern to making rope from rushes. But these houses and the Eco House aren't the only remarkable things in the Stonehenge area. Some years ago, archaeologists uncovered a burial site close to Stonehenge that predates the monument itself. This Neolithic long barrow, dating back approximately 56 to 5,700 years, likely contains the remains of some of Britain's earliest inhabitants. The burial site was identified through aerial images that revealed its distinct shape beneath the crops. Salisbury Plain is rich with ancient sites, including Stonehenge, various mounds, and monuments. The area has remained undisturbed over the centuries, which is likely why so many ancient structures are still intact. This discovery also shows a significant shift in human lifestyle during that era, marking a transition from a nomadic existence to settled farming and animal husbandry, much like the Eco House itself. The long barrow in question measures about 85 feet long and 65 feet wide, though much of its above-ground structure has been lost to farming over the years. If this site is like others in the vicinity, it contains the remains of 30 to 50 individuals, along with cow skulls, which were significant to those early communities.
Let's dive into the fascinating world of Tamil, a language that's truly one of a kind. From its vibrant history to its user-friendly nature and its wide coverage, Tamil is a linguistic gem that'll leave you in awe. For starters, Tamil holds the title of being the oldest living language on the planet. I mean, it's been around for more than 5,000 years. It's hard to know if it's truly the oldest language ever, but it sure takes the cake for being the oldest living language still in use today. The word Tamil itself isn't just a one-trick pony. It has multiple meanings up its sleeve. Of course, it refers to the language itself, But it also signifies beauty, sweetness, and even the concept of being natural. Talk about a versatile word. How many people still speak this language today, you might wonder? Tamil is like the rock star of languages in India, with over 84 million native speakers. Globally, almost 90 million people proudly call Tamil their mother tongue. Hold on to your hats, because things are about to get divine. In India, you'll find a temple dedicated to none other than Tamul Tai. Now, Tai means mother, and this deity is considered the personification of the Tamil language as a loving and nurturing parent. This language is also not just limited to its homeland. It's a language that has spread its wings across its neighboring areas. For instance, it's also an official language in Singapore and Sri Lanka. Not to mention, it's also recognized as a minority language in South Africa, Malaysia, and Mauritius. Have you ever wondered how it all started? You know, the whole spoken word shenanigan? And where? It's not like words magically popped out of thin air, right? It must have taken quite some time to develop. Linguists don't have an exact date or any clue about what those ancient languages sounded like, but they believe the first spoken language sprouted up around 100,000 years ago. Unfortunately, since written language only came about 5,000 years ago, we don't have much info on what those early languages sounded like. All we know is that they're somehow related to the languages we speak today. Earth is one massive place. We're talking over 7,000 spoken languages among a population of over 7 billion. Sounds like a lot, right? Well, historically speaking, that's not too many. In fact, many languages are gradually fading away, being replaced by their respective countries' official languages. People are hopping on the bandwagon of learning the dominant language for better educational and economic opportunities. Eventually, we might end up with a global language to rule them all. At the moment, the most used language in the world is English. But hey, it wasn't always like this. Back in the day, before the world became one huge linked web, there were oodles of small nations and communities scattered all over the globe. That means there were probably hundreds of thousands of languages evolving just like living organisms. But let's travel back in time for a bit, shall we? Picture a bunch of early humans roaming the land in their little tribes and communities. Within these groups, language became the bee's knees, the go-to for communication. It was crucial for their hunter-gatherer lifestyle. This language thingamajig allowed them to hunt like pros, multiply their numbers, build cool stuff, and survive in all sorts of gnarly conditions, even at high altitudes. Plus, it gave them a leg up on their rivals, like the Neanderthals. Sure, those folks may have been smarter and stronger, but it's widely believed they didn't gather together as Homo sapiens did. And so, about 40,000 years ago, poof, bye-bye Neanderthals. It just goes to show that language is quite a handy-dandy tool. Or at least that's one of the theories. Fast forward a bit, and humans had conquered all the major land masses. Mesopotamia, for instance, was the hotspot for this linguistic revolution, and by around 3200 BCE, Sumerian, a totally groovy language, stole the show. To this day, it's one of the oldest ones we know of, if not the oldest. What's interesting is that Sumerian had no linguistic siblings. It was like the loner kid on the linguistic playground. Let's look into the Sumerians' writing skills for a bit too. It's nothing like what we're used to today. Scientists have named it cuneiform writing, and it emerged as a means to record trade and political information. As a matter of fact, the first recorded name in history wasn't of a king or some powerful figure. It was most likely the name of an accountant, but it's difficult to know for sure. Cuneiform consisted of a collection of pictograms that represented objects or people, much like the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Sumerian culture thrived in several city-states located in the southern region of Mesopotamia. Uruk, known as the first true city, was among the stars of the show. However, these cities eventually faced some unwelcome visitors. As a result, by 2000 BCE, Sumerian had taken a back seat, becoming a classical language just like Latin. Now here's a little twist in the tale. Sumerian might not actually hold the title of the oldest known language. Egyptian, for instance, emerged around the same time as the Sumerian civilization, but along the banks of the Nile. This ancient language also made use of pictograms in its writing system, but it did undergo some serious transformations due to its interactions with neighboring languages like ancient Greek, Persian, and Latin. By the time of Roman occupation, Egyptian had become a dead language, gradually replaced by Greek. Now let's give a special shout out to another one of those old languages that are still spoken today, Hebrew. This remarkable language has been around for over 3,000 years and has managed to remain relatively unchanged throughout its long history. Hebrew is one of the official languages in Israel, and around 63% of the population in this country speaks it. Also, there are approximately 6.1 million people all over the world who can proudly say that Hebrew is their first language. We can't finish up this list without mentioning the amazing Latin language. It all started in this place called Latium in the old Roman Empire, and that's how it got its name. Back in the day, Latin was the fancy language for all well-educated folks. But here's a fun twist. The Latin of yesteryear was a bit different from what we can check out in ancient books today. The alphabet they used was a total rebel, and they even wrote from right to left. Talk about turning the writing world upside down. But over time, they realized it was more fun to go from left to right. Latin literature? Oh boy, it's considered the creme de la creme of ancient writing. You know, the kind that scholars and bookworms go crazy for. If there were an Oscar for ancient literature, Latin would be cleaning up all the awards. Latin was also like this ancient influencer. It's been around for so long that it has influenced a bunch of modern languages. Many English words are either straight up taken from Latin or have been heavily influenced by it. More so, Latin has even spawned a family of languages called Romance languages. No, not about love stories, chocolates, and flowers. Romance languages are the offspring of Latin, thanks to the not-so-gentle nudge of the Roman Empire. We're talking about languages like French, Spanish, Romanian, Portuguese, and Italian. But here's a bummer. Latin is considered a long-gone language. It's frozen in time, like a linguistic time capsule. While living languages like English keep changing and growing, Latin is stuck in the past. It had its transformation and alteration phase when it was still spoken, but now it's just enjoying retirement in the linguistic retirement home. Regardless, Latin still sneaks into our daily lives without us even realizing it. You know when someone asks you the time and you say it's 4 p.m., well, guess what? You're speaking Latin. PM stands for post-meridium, which basically means after midday. And AM? That's ante-meridium, meaning before midday.
Canada is known for its snowy mountains, untouched forests, pristine lakes, friendly, helpful people, eh? And that delicious maple syrup. Now they get to add something else to the list: the world's oldest water. Back in 2016, researchers drilled down 1.9 miles and found an ancient pool of water at Kidmine, Ontario. The water was believed to be at least 2 billion years old. Not fresh water. The water was found bubbling up in caverns deep underground, inside the 3 million square miles of the Canadian Shield, one of the world's largest geological continental shields. The area endures very little plate tectonic activity, possibly explaining how the water remained untouched for so long. Scientists and researchers analyzed the water and found dissolved gases of helium, argon, xenon, and neon, untouched by any outside source. There were even traces of microbes dating back billions of years. This was a stunning find for science that allowed us to gaze back in time at a lost world. If life-supporting water can be found miles below the Earth, it could be possible to find the same thing on other planets, like Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter's moons as well. Point Nemo is the furthest point from land on Earth, officially called the Oceanic Point of Inaccessibility, kind of like my parking space. It's so far from land that the closest humans to it are usually astronauts. The International Space Station orbits the Earth from around 250 miles away, while the closest populated spot to Point Nemo on Earth is more than 1,670 miles in all directions. Since its real title is a bit long, it was nicknamed Point Nemo after Captain Nemo from Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Nemo means no one in Latin, which suits this area perfectly because there's no people around. The Crooked Forest is found in Gryfino, Poland. It's a grove of 400 unusually curved pine trees that were planted around the 1930s. They bend northwards at a sharp 90-degree angle from the tree's base, but then remarkably turn back to grow straight up into the sky. Some of the curves reach out 3 to 9 feet sideways, but the trees are healthy and many grow to nearly 50 feet tall. These crooked pines are surrounded by a larger forest of straight-growing pines. There's no explanation as to why they're bent the way they are. The theories for this strange development range from weather conditions to human intervention, but no one knows for sure. The Hamza River is one of the longest and widest rivers in the world, and it sits right underneath the Amazon River itself. At a depth of 2.5 miles, this river flows a little more than a trickle compared to the Great River above it. The push of the Amazon River's water into the Atlantic is around 35 million gallons per second, while the Hamza only manages 1 million gallons per second. Either way, there's no choice but to go with the flow. Around the same length as the Amazon itself, 3,700 miles, it's the width that stunned the science world. It's 125 to 250 miles wide, compared to the Amazon's width of about 1/2 mile to 60 miles wide. The Cave of Crystals was discovered in 2000 when miners drained water from a zinc mine in Chihuahua, Mexico. The state, not the dog. What scientists found was an enchanting cave filled with colossal gypsum crystals that were larger than 33 feet and over 3 feet wide. They were so pure that scientists were unable to work out how old they were, but researchers believe they discovered a 50,000-year-old sample of bacteria inside one of the crystals. Also known as the River of Five Colors, Caño Cristalis is one of the most amazing natural wonders in all of Colombia. The area is filled with waterfalls, pools, and caverns, but the river itself is the true wonder. Every year, between June and November, the river hypnotizes spectators with amazing yellows, greens, blues, blacks, and red shades to create a liquid rainbow. A red plant that grows in the riverbed is the main cause of this unique phenomenon. Other colors come from the black rocks, green algae, clear water, and yellow sand, producing a pearly effect. The colors change every year because of the plant's growth from rainfall, temperature, and sunlight. During the rest of the year, the riverbed appears in a dull green hue. Scientists in Hawaii discovered that red algae were making sounds in the waters around coral reefs. The noise was believed to come from the loud snapping shrimp, until researchers put the sound and presence of algae together and started monitoring the bubbles. As the algae use photosynthesis for food, they produce tiny bubbles that collect on their surfaces. When the bubbles separate off the plant, they make a ping or popping sound. Reefs can be smothered and suffocate if they're covered by too many algae. Discovering that photosynthesis makes a sound could be useful for the reef's preservation. The algae could provide early warnings for scientists, so they can stop these vulnerable areas from being overrun. After heavy rains and seismic activity hit Kenya's Great Rift Valley in March 2018, a vast chasm expanded across the land. The rift measured quite a few miles long and was over 50 feet wide in some parts. Essentially, it was tearing Africa in two. Africa sits on two tectonic plates, the Nubian and the Somali plate. Deep below Earth's surface, driven by the active mantle, the plates are being pulled apart. This creates the huge, extraordinary rifts we see on the surface. It will take millions of years for the large continent to actually separate into two pieces. I won't be around then. But when it does, it'll also create a new ocean basin. The Eucalyptus deglupta thrive in the tropical forests of Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines, and they're like something straight out of a video game or fantasy movie. Growing up to an enormous height of 250 feet in its native environment, this one-of-a-kind tree has bark that displays green, bright blue, orange, purple, and red streaks as it ages, kinda like me. As strips of bark fall away, the tree's colors change, and the bright green inner bark is revealed. Off of the beautiful island of Mauritius in the Indian Ocean, there's a spectacular view that has to be seen to believe. You'll need to hop on a plane to get a bird's-eye view, though. What looks like an underwater waterfall is actually sand from the shores being pushed off of a high coastal shelf by ocean currents. It falls all the way into the deep dark depths of the ocean on the southernmost tip of the island. Most of the ocean waters around the island are only 26 to 490 feet deep, but this deep plunge drops down a few miles, creating the illusion of a waterfall. This oceanic shelf didn't exist a few million years ago. but seafloor spreading has created this quite recently. The walking trees of the Amazon are one of the most unique and puzzling ways plants move to get to the perfect spot for everything they need. These trees walk by allowing the new roots to replace the older ones while searching for more sunlight in the dense forest. As the roots fix themselves into the new soil, the tree bends towards the new roots, leaving the old roots to slowly rise. Traveling to a new place with better sunlight and more solid ground can take a couple of years. This is because they only move around 0.8 of an inch a day, or around 65 feet a year. Now you can just imagine this going on in your front yard. You plant the tree here, and next year it's all the way over there. Ah well. Down in southern Costa Rica, 300 stone petrospheres are dotted all over the forest. Some weigh as much as a bowling ball, while others can be up to 15 tons. Their purpose and how they were made so long ago are lost to us. Discovered in the 1930s, a lot of them were removed and transported around the world. It wasn't until the 1970s that we began to preserve and protect these stones. While the stones are mostly a mystery, archaeologists know they're made from granodiorite rock, similar to granite. If they were carved by a civilization, their near-perfect shape must have been made by chiseling away with small stones. Ethiopia's Danakil Depression is an environment that looks like it belongs on another planet. Filled with lava pools, bright neon-colored hot springs, and vast salt flats, it's also the contender for the hottest year-round temperature of 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Poisonous gases fill the area with hot springs filled with acid. Worse, it only receives up to 8 inches of annual rainfall. It's also one of the lowest places on the planet, at 410 feet below sea level. No wonder it's one of the most inhospitable places on the planet. Hey, sounds great. No crowds. Let's go. The Moai statues have been standing tall and proud for hundreds of years. Once people put an enormous effort into carving these grand sculptures, and then they just suddenly stopped making them. But why? Let's figure out this mystery. Easter Island, located 2,500 miles east of Tahiti, has an area of 63 square miles. To this day, it's one of the most isolated islands in the world. Once it was covered with forests, filled with different trees and ferns. But when the first humans came to the island around 400 CE, the forest slowly began to disappear. And starting from 1250 CE, Moai statues began appearing all over the place. People made them from different types of rock: compressed volcanic ash, basalt, trachyte, and red scoria. As it's a volcanic island, these were all the ingredients the creators of the statues had to use. And once the builders completed their work, they covered the statues with pumice. The faces of the statues are different, but they all have distinct expressions, with heavy brows and large noses. Their arms are carved into the body. Some have hats on top of their heads. There are nearly 900 statues all over the island. They differ in size. The average height is 13 feet tall, and the largest ones reach 33 feet in height and weigh up to 82 tons. Because the statues have so many different faces, there are theories that they represent and honor ancestors, chiefs, and other important people who lived on the island. But without any clear evidence, it's almost impossible to figure out the true purpose of the Moai. Once they stood beautifully along the coast, watching over people in settlements, and their backs faced toward the spirit world of the sea. When Europeans first discovered the Moai statues in the 1700s, many of them had already toppled over, and the construction of statues had stopped way earlier than that. Huge amounts of effort were put into making these things. Expert craftspeople spent a great deal of time slowly carving the statues with basic picks. A team of up to 6 people would work hard for an entire year to make just one statue. Then they often had to transport it to its special place on the island, as far as 11 miles. With the help of carbon dating, experts have managed to figure out that the statues started to appear in 1250 CE. And then, suddenly, in 1500 CE or so, the process just stopped. The creators of the statue just left their stone chisels where they were last used, and only a quarter of all the statues were actually placed where they were supposed to be. Half of them still remained in the quarry, while others were left on the ground mid-transit. Something happened on the island, and it caused everyone to just lose interest in the statues. There are many theories around why it could happen, and they mostly relate to deforestation. Islanders may have used wood to move the statues across the island. They possibly did this with the help of sleds and ropes, or even used logs to roll the statues or canoes to float them. The wood started to deplete eventually. Trees on the island took very long to grow, and rats ate most seeds. People had many uses for wood, and they needed it not only for practical things, but also to create other statues. Another reason why the inhabitants of the island could have stopped building the statues might be that they were busy with other projects. Specialized rock gardens were becoming more common with a growing population. They were great for the soil, keeping it warm and fertilizing it at the same time. Islanders spent much time and effort making these rock gardens, and there simply wasn't enough time to focus on building and moving the statues. Another theory suggests that what people believed in changed over time. Supposedly, the islands once saw the statues as a connection to their ancestors. After some time, though, rituals depicting a show of strength and endurance became more widespread. And with these rituals, islanders started to carve images related to seabirds. Seabirds became the main animal on the island. People started to believe that their ancestors looked over them through birds instead of the statues, so there was no longer a reason to build the Moai. Anyway, these theories might be true, but the main problem was that the small island couldn't support a growing population. What was once a lush land covered in forests quickly became a barren landscape. For the first few centuries, people relied on forest resources, but agriculture became more important sometime after 1550, when forests disappeared. Tribes that once worked together to build the fantastic monoliths focused on competing against one another instead. During this struggle for land and resources, the Moai statues were toppled over because people wanted to reduce their significance. Over the following centuries, all the statues were pushed over, but not all of them deliberately. Many fell naturally after being neglected for so long. Some even ended up in the ocean water surrounding the island, and there they sat for a while. But there was some good news for these statues. They were re-erected, providing a great experience for visitors from all over the world. If you make a journey all the way to this isolated island, the first question you'll probably ask will not be how the statues were made or how they were moved. It will be, how on earth did anyone even make it here in the first place? It was one of the most amazing feats ever. The Polynesians sure did some pretty extraordinary things. From as early as 1500 BCE, these boat-faring people began to explore their world. They used the most advanced marine inventions of their time. They sailed across the ocean in catamarans and outrigger boats, starting in Southeast Asia and inhabiting many more places throughout the Pacific. They lived as far north as Hawaii in 900 BCE and all the way to the south in New Zealand by 1200 BCE. And the farthest journey to the east was, of course, Easter Island. In only a few hundred years, these early sailors inhabited an area of thousands of square miles. They simply memorized where they had already been and, this way, managed to navigate the ocean. They used a wide range of techniques. They watched the sun as it rose and set during the day. Stars helped them at night. If it was overcast and sailors couldn't figure out direction visually, they used other brilliant methods. They watched the movements of ocean currents and wave patterns and paid attention to bioluminescence in the water. These patterns helped them find where specific islands were located. These seafarers even understood how islands and atolls in the distance caused air and sea interference patterns. Birds provided them with certain signs too. Some of them migrated long distances from one island to another, which gave travelers some kind of a visual connection for their route. Other types of birds had specific feeding times. Sailors knew when and where they hunted and directed their boats depending on where these birds fed. Vikings certainly get way too much credit for their seafaring abilities. Where they used a sun compass, the early Polynesians relied purely on the knowledge of how nature itself could guide them. Their skills were so advanced that in 1769, Captain James Cook, an English explorer, even hired a Polynesian navigator because of his extensive knowledge of the seas. But even more surprising was the fact that he drew a map from memory. It covered an area that was 2,000 miles wide. In this region, there were 130 islands, and the navigator knew 74 of those islands by name. At the beginning of their voyage, Captain Cook often disregarded the navigator's advice. But toward the end of their journey, he was very impressed. He also recognized the Polynesians as possibly the most widespread nation on Earth. It happened 66 million years ago. Hey, it could have been September. A massive asteroid slammed into Earth, bringing along chaos and devastation. The tragic aftermath of the terrifying collision led to the extinction of dinosaurs. Yes, I'm talking about the Chicxulub asteroid that left a massive crater in Mexico and changed life on Earth forever. And now, it turns out it wasn't the only cosmic rock to hit our planet during that time. Scientists have just confirmed there was another asteroid. This second space rock wasn't as big as Chicxulub, but it still packed a punch. It crashed to the ground off the coast of West Africa, smashing into the ocean and leaving a crater called the Nader crater. And tell you what, it wasn't a small splash. The impact was so powerful, it triggered a whole tsunami. It was more than 2,600 feet high, almost as high as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest man-made structure in the world. But how did we come to the conclusion that there was a second impact? Well, this researcher spotted the Nader crater in 2022. Dr. Nicholson was looking for some high-tech scans of the ocean floor when he noticed a massive 5.5-mile-wide depression under almost 1,000 feet of water. Well, he thought it could be an asteroid impact crater, but at the time, the evidence he had wasn't solid. But now, scientists have confirmed that this is the real deal. A second asteroid did hit Earth during the dinosaur extinction era. Now, let's see how they figured all this out. For one thing, there were those super high-resolution 3D seismic images. They allowed researchers to peel back layers of the ocean floor and get a crystal-clear look at the crater. It was like going from a blurry old ultrasound to the kind of 3D scans where you can see every little feature. Their findings confirm that the crater was left by an asteroid, somewhere between 1,500 to 1,640 feet wide. And it didn't just create a hole in the ground. The impact was so intense that it produced a central peak, formed escalating ridges around the crater, and even left a damage zone that stretched out for thousands of miles. Using those super detailed images, the scientists have managed to reconstruct what happened right after the asteroid hit the surface of our planet. First, it slammed into the ocean, creating an initial bowl-shaped crater. As the shockwave spread, the seabed was shaken so violently that it triggered landslides, and the soft sediment surrounding the crater collapsed inward, creating a noticeable brim. As you already know, the impact also triggered a tsunami, and it was so shockingly powerful that its waves didn't just go outward, they actually turned back towards the crater, leaving huge scars on the ocean floor. And this wasn't just one big wave. No, it was a whole series of them, a train of tsunamis smashing everything in their path. Now, this second asteroid impact is a huge deal for scientists. It's a rare opportunity to study a marine impact crater in such incredible detail. There are only about 20 confirmed marine craters in the world, and none of them have been captured with this level of precision before. Plus, this data allows scientists to test new ideas about how craters form in water. You see, unlike craters on land, marine craters are hidden under layers of sediment, which makes them tricky to study. But with this new 3D imaging, we can look at the crater in all its layers. It's like slicing into a cake to see what's inside. Dr. Nicholson and his team are now dreaming of drilling into the crater and recovering samples from deep below the ocean floor. This would allow them to measure the shock pressure during the impact and figure out what happened in the minutes, hours, and days following the collision. Of course, the Chicxulub asteroid is still the star of the show when it comes to the dinosaurs' extinction. This space traveler was giant, somewhere between 6 and 9 miles wide. It hit Earth at a devastating angle, sending vaporized rock and gas into the atmosphere. It caused an impact winter that lasted for 15 years, because all that stuff blocked out the sun and plunged Earth into darkness. Now, probably the most intriguing thing is that some experts think the Nader asteroid might have been a chunk that had broken off from Chicxulub before it hit Earth. It's still just a theory, but if true, it could mean that Earth got hit by a double whammy from space. Now let's travel back in time to the year 1908 in Siberia. Look around. You see nothing but trees and rivers. And suddenly, a huge object, around 150 to 300 feet in diameter, dashes through the Earth's atmosphere. Is it a comet? An asteroid? Scientists aren't sure. What they do know for sure is that this intruder blew up in the sky over Tunguska, leading to one of the most powerful blasts in recorded history. It completely leveled the forest below, knocking out 80 million trees over an area of around 830 square miles. And that's an area larger than that of cities like Los Angeles or New York. The trees were literally flattened, and their trunks were stripped of branches. They were also arranged in a bizarre radial pattern around the epicenter. But what if this explosion had happened over a city? Every single building would have been destroyed, and countless lives would have been lost. Luckily, this disaster occurred in a super remote part of Siberia. The creepiest thing, though? When scientists finally reached the area years later, they found no impact crater. No wonder it led to even more mystery. The most logical explanation is that when the object went off in the sky, probably around 3 to 6 miles above the ground, it blew up before it could hit the ground, and still, it didn't stop the blast from leveling an entire forest. Fast forward to 2013 and another mind-blowing event, this time over a much more populated area, the city of Chelyabinsk. It was a regular February morning when an asteroid about 60 feet in diameter entered Earth's atmosphere, lighting up the sky. It was moving at a staggering speed of around 43,000 miles per hour. It blew up in midair, about 18 miles above the city. It was a horrific view, but luckily, the asteroid disintegrated high enough in the atmosphere without hitting the ground. If it had touched down, the city would have been in big trouble, because even though there was no direct impact, the explosion still created a shockwave that tore through the atmosphere, hitting the ground with enough force to shatter windows all over the place. The blast damaged around 7,200 buildings, but fortunately, there were no direct fatalities. Still, it was a major wake-up call. This wasn't just some far-off cosmic event like Tunguska. This asteroid exploded over a modern populated area, and the damage was very real. The good news? Scientists are getting better at spotting such objects before they get too close. Space agencies around the world, like NASA, are tracking near-Earth objects to figure out which ones could pose a risk. But as we can see from these two events, sometimes space rocks can still sneak up on us. And while the chances of a major impact are low, the stakes are really high. At the moment, there's one asteroid that NASA's keeping an eye on. It's called Bennu, and it's about the same size as the Nader impactor. Bennu is considered one of the most hazardous objects in near-Earth orbit. According to NASA, there's a small chance it could hit the Earth between the years 2178 and 2290, and the biggest risk date is September 24, 2182. But don't freak out just yet. The odds of the impact are only 1 in 2,700, but still, it's a reminder that Earth is always in the cosmic firing line. Egyptian archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery near Cairo just recently. Drumroll please. The most ancient and most complete mummy yet discovered in the country. Yes, they were keeping it under wraps. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs close to the step pyramid of Djoser, dating back to the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another belonging to a secret keeper who had the power to perform special ceremonies. Another interesting tomb was that of a writer, which featured the largest statues ever found in the area. This vast burial site is also home to more than a dozen pyramids and resting grounds. Probably one of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut. She ruled Egypt like a boss for around 20 years, building all sorts of impressive buildings and creating new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. However, Carter did find 2 coffins in another tomb, one of which belonged to Hatshepsut's wet nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether that mysterious lady was the queen herself. They found a molar tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it, and when they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramses II was a pretty impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that eventually made history. Now, we don't hear too much about his daddy. Okay, I'll stop. Ramses is considered to be the most powerful pharaoh in all of Egypt, as he reigned for a whopping 6 decades. He also lived to be over 90 years old. Now that's pretty amazing, considering the time he lived in. Ramses II supposedly had over 100 offspring too. Talk about a big family. When he passed away, his body was originally buried in the Valley of the Kings, but some sneaky guys tried to rob his tomb of all his treasures. Officials back in the day weren't having any of that though, so they moved his body to a secret location to keep it safe. Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramses II's mummy was discovered along with a bunch of other rulers and important officials. But it wasn't in the best condition, so archaeologists flew it to Paris to get it, pampered. Problem was, he couldn't just be transported into another country. The only solution available was to give Ramses II his own passport. His occupation was listed as king, and the document even featured his photo. Most mummies aren't necessarily known for having the most hydrated skin. But that of an ancient woman, also known as Lady Di, proves otherwise. No, not that Lady Di. This wealthy lady from ancient times was discovered in an ornate tomb in 1971, and she looked fabulous, if we can say so about a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the moisture in the environment and the lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was on point, and she was still flexible. The museum that now proudly displays her mummy also shows a ton of fancy items that were buried with her, like dinnerware and musical instruments. Archaeologists investigated the mummy further and discovered that she passed away from a heart attack at around 50 years old. Even though it hasn't been around for over 2,000 years, Lady Di is still making history. The mummy of Otzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991. Austrian authorities initially thought he was a modern mountaineer because he was so well preserved. Turns out, he was actually from the Copper Age. He was found in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. Through studying his mummy, we've learned so much about life in Copper Age Europe. For example, we know that he was a native of Central Europe and enjoyed eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, narrowing arteries, and intestinal problems. But he likely used acupuncture and medicinal herbs to treat these conditions. And apparently, he was pretty handy with tools. He sharpened them just days before his untimely demise. Who knows if he was expecting trouble or just getting ready for some routine work. Now, King Tut and his story is most likely the one that made all mummies famous. This pharaoh passed away at the young age of 19, more than 3,000 years ago. But his mummy is still one of the most well-known in the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still intact, unlike many other royal tombs. It had some seriously blinged-out coffins, including one made of solid gold. Not only did Tut's tomb give us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian history, but his mummy also taught us a lot about the time he lived in. DNA analysis helped identify his parents and revealed that the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that might have made walking a bit tough. Now, Ginger is most likely one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like a time traveler from 5,000 years ago who's still looking fly with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails. Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the earliest known mummified body. Before people even knew about mummification, they used to place bodies in shallow graves in the hot, dry sand. And since the sand absorbed all the water, bacteria couldn't reproduce and the body was preserved naturally. Now, scientists are not sure if Ginger's preservation was intentional or not, but since he was buried with some pottery vessels, it's likely that whoever buried him knew some serious preservation techniques. If you want to meet Ginger in person, he's currently chilling at the British Museum. One Dutch art collector bought a statue from Asia and ended up finding a weird discovery. The statue contained a mummy hidden inside. Unfortunately, the body was too fragile to move, So they had to leave it there. The coolest part is that this mummy is over 1,000 years old and was on display for 200 years before being encased in the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found out that the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writings. Experts think he might have done this thing called self-mummification, which is a pretty intense process involving a special diet and tea that makes your body less prone to bacteria. Only a few people could handle this ritual, and those who managed to do that were seriously respected. No other Egyptian queen has baffled scientists and historians like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name translates to "the beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name, huh? Even though she wasn't a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti still managed to leave a lasting impression. Written records suggest that, as a wife and queen, she held an incredibly influential role. Because of her power, she was indeed admired, but she also managed to make quite a lot of enemies throughout her life. She was also related to King Tut, but not biologically. Rather, she was his stepmother. So far, locals have yet to identify her mummy, but that may soon change. A local Egyptologist who has been busy excavating tombs in the Valley of the Kings has found two mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. According to specialists, we may soon finally get a definitive answer about the identity of these two mummies. And if one of them does turn out to be Nefertiti, we could be in for a real treat. DNA analysis and CT scans of the mummy could give us the most complete and accurate image of the queen that we've ever seen. It's crazy to think that we've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and prosperity in Egypt, but unfortunately passed away in a period of social turmoil, leading to her gravesite being lost. Now, where's my mummy? Hey, if you think Stonehenge is one of the oldest stone monuments ever, well, let me introduce you to Göbekli Tepe. Buckle up, we gotta travel to Turkey to meet this really old guy. Yeah, he's too old to travel. Jokes aside, Göbekli Tepe, an archaeological site located in southeastern Turkey that dates back to the Neolithic period around 10,000 BCE. It's considered to be one of the oldest and most significant archaeological discoveries in recent times. The site consists of a series of circular and rectangular structures made of stone pillars. Yeah, it does look like its younger brother Stonehenge. Some of those pillars are decorated with intricate carvings of animals and other symbols. Now, you maybe wonder, hey, why on earth did they make such a fascinating building? What was its purpose? Sorry, I got no answer for that. The purpose of the site is still unknown, but it is believed to have been a ceremonial center for the ancient people who lived in the area. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe has challenged long-held beliefs about the development of human civilization, as it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier than previously thought. Okay, pack your stuff, our travel's just started. Next destination, Masada. It's an ancient fortress located in Israel on a plateau overlooking the Dead Sea. Hey, look at that view, spectacular, huh? It was built by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE, and it was very smartly built. Within the fortress, there were various facilities such as storehouses, barracks, a palace, and a set of cisterns capable of holding approximately 40,000 cubic meters of rainwater. People living there believed that the collected runoff from a single day's rainfall could provide sustenance for over 1,000 individuals for a period of 2 to 3 years. Access to the fortress was limited to 3 steep and winding paths leading up to fortified gates. Still, at one point, the fortress was occupied by people who had fled Jerusalem after the city was captured by the Romans. They held out against the invaders for several months, but eventually they were defeated. But these guys didn't surrender. The story of Masada has become a symbol of resistance and bravery. Today, Masada is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The next flight is going to be short. We're popping over to Egypt to see the Karnak Temple complex. It's a vast ancient Egyptian temple complex located in the city of Luxor, Egypt. It was built over a period of 2,000 years and covers an area of more than 200 acres. The complex is dedicated to the worship of the deity Amun-Roka. Wait a minute, that should be Amun-Ra, and it was one of the most important religious centers in ancient Egypt. The Karnak Temple consists of several temples, chapels, and other buildings, including the Great Temple of Amun, the Temple of Khonsu, and the Temple of Ptah. Ptah! The Great Temple of Amun is the largest and most impressive temple in the complex, with massive columns, statues, and other decorations. One of the most famous features of the Karnak Temple complex is the Avenue of Sphinxes, which is a long avenue lined with Sphinx statues that leads from the entrance of the complex to the Great Temple of Amun. Another notable feature is the Hypostyle Hall, which is a massive hall with 134 columns that are over 70 feet high. The Karnak Temple complex is a popular tourist attraction and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's considered one of the most important archaeological sites in Egypt and provides a fascinating glimpse into the religion and culture of ancient Egypt. Hey, we can't hop on the next flight and leave Egypt until we see the Pyramid of Djoser. It has another name, by the way. It's also known as the Step Pyramid. This ancient Egyptian site is located in Saqqara. It was built during the 27th century BCE for the pharaoh Djoser by his architect Imhotep, who is considered one of the most important figures in Egyptian history. People believe this pyramid is the first monumental structure built entirely of stone and is an important example of early Egyptian architecture. The pyramid originally stood at 203 feet tall and was surrounded by a complex of buildings and courtyards. It was constructed in 6 layers, each smaller than the one below it, giving it the distinctive step-like appearance. The pyramid was used as a burial place for Pharaoh Djoser and was surrounded by a vast necropolis that contained the tombs of many other important officials. The Grateful Dead? The Pyramid of Djoser has several renovations and additions over the centuries, including the addition of a limestone casing that covered the original step structure. However, much of the pyramid was destroyed over time, and today only the central core remains. Despite this, it remains an important archaeological site and a popular tourist attraction in Egypt. Alrighty, we're ready to move on. There's one more pretty recent discovery we gotta see today. The Tower of Jericho was only discovered during excavations in the 1950s and 60s. It's an ancient stone tower located in the city of Jericho in the West Bank. Just like Göbekli Tepe, this one is believed to be one of the oldest stone structures in the world, dating back to approximately 8000 BCE. The tower stands at over 28 feet tall. It's made up of 2 main sections, an inner tower and an outer tower, which are connected by a series of stairs. The purpose of the Tower of Jericho is not entirely clear, but it is believed to have served as a defensive structure or a watchtower. It may have also had religious significance, as it was located near a sacred spring. The Tower of Jericho is a significant archaeological site and has provided valuable insights into the early history of human civilization. It's open to visitors and is a popular destination for tourists interested in ancient history. Now, this ancient site even got attention from Netflix, and they made a movie where the action takes place in Mohenjo-Daro. This site was a major center of the Indus Valley civilization in present-day Pakistan. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the largest cities of the ancient world, with a population estimated to have been around 40,000 in its peak. Trust me, that must have been a crazy megalopolis back then. The city was notable for its advanced urban planning, with sophisticated drainage and sanitation systems, and its impressive architecture, including the Great Bath and the Granary. Mohenjo-Daro was abandoned around 1900 BCE, and its ruins were only rediscovered in the 1920s. Today, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and an important archaeological site for the study of ancient South Asian civilization. We're heading to a teeny-tiny country that has quite an impressive history. Welcome to Malta. The Zygantia Temples are a Neolithic site located on the Mediterranean island of Gozo. They're probably one of the oldest freestanding structures in the world, dating back to around 3600 to 3200 BCE. The temples consist of two megalithic structures, each with multiple rooms and altars. The name Zygantia means giant tower in Maltese, as people believe that only giants could have built such massive structures. The temples are believed to have been used for religious purposes and are considered to be an important example of prehistoric architecture. They were added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1980. Well, you must be pretty tired, but there's one more place we gotta visit today. Our plane is already landing in Armenia, and we're here to see the Temple of Garni. Look, this one is well preserved. This temple dates back to the 1st century CE. It was built by King Tiridates I as a dedication to the sun deity Mir. Sadly, the temple was destroyed in the 17th century during an earthquake, which is quite a common thing for this area, but it was later reconstructed in the 20th century. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction and is also listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
We've all been afraid of the dark at some point in our lives, haven't we? I mean, do you remember getting tucked into bed by your mom or dad after they read you some scary fairy tale with monsters and dragons or even dinosaurs? But just as your parents were about to turn the lights off and silently step out of your room, you remembered. What if there was something hiding under your bed? Or worse, what if some spooky creature was stuck somewhere in the closet? You could probably get up and check, but it was too dark out there. Wouldn't it be great to have some source of light that would come from within your body? You could always use it whenever you get surrounded by darkness. Unfortunately, as humans, we aren't able to do that. But there are a bunch of creatures out there that can, in fact, light themselves up. That's thanks to a little something scientists call bioluminescence. Animals and fish living in the ocean tend to have this talent more often than others. And you can find these creatures anywhere, close to the surface or deep down at the bottom. 2.5 miles deep if you have a knack for numbers. These creatures use their light for a lot of things, like communicating with other members of their species, luring in prey, and even scaring away enemies. Bioluminescence is basically an organism's ability to emit its own light. Chemistry has a lot to do with it. Such animals use two chemicals, one called luciferin and the other called luciferase. Add a bit of oxygen and bam! Light! Should you ever wonder if you actually observe bioluminescence or if someone just dropped a glow stick in the ocean, be on the lookout for neon blue, green, or even red sparkles in the sea. They're usually spread over a large area. This can even make the water look like glitter or a starry sky. You can thank squid, tiny crustaceans, and algae for this romantic atmosphere. Now, I've got another unusual phenomenon for you. How about a golden waterfall? I'm not kidding, it actually exists, and it's a natural phenomenon. To see it, you have to drive to Yosemite National Park to the Horsetail Fall. Make sure to plan your trip in winter or early spring. That's the only time during the year when you can see this awesome phenomenon. It doesn't need any scientific explanation. It's nothing more than sunlight at dusk hitting the waterfall in such a unique way that it makes it look like a river of lava. Or gold, your choice. That's the reason why during this time of year, the Horsetail Fall is also named the Fire Fall. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is becoming less and less visible within the years, mostly because of drought and other issues connecting with the melting of snow. So, should you ever decide to visit, keep an eye on the waterfall, since the effect is very brief. Ever heard of a dirty thunderstorm? It's also called volcanic lightning. Apparently, specialists looking into the phenomenon have yet to fully grasp what it is. When a regular thunderstorm happens, particles with positive and negative charges collide, hence the giant spark we call lightning. It also makes a lot of noise, which you can recognize as thunder. But when a volcano is erupting, some of the volcanic ash particles get electrically charged, and while getting projected into the air with a huge force, they collide and cause electrical discharges. This whole process makes it look like there's lightning coming from the volcano itself. Imagine all that ash, gas, and smoke coming from the crater, and then add some electricity to the mix. It'll make the whole picture look really bizarre. No wonder this phenomenon is called the dirty thunderstorm. Now, how about clouds that look like waves? Those are called asperitas clouds, and they're actually quite close to the ground, unlike your regular day-to-day clouds. The name comes from the word aspero, which in Latin translates to rough or uneven. On rare occasion, you may spot such clouds when the weather is calm, but they're mostly associated with thunderstorms. These clouds appear during unstable atmospheric conditions, and surprisingly, they don't produce rain. Even though they do resemble dark storm-like clouds, they also create random patterns, tricking your eyes into thinking you're looking at the surface of the sea from under the water. Another impressive kind of cloud is called mammatus clouds. What makes them so special is a series of bulges emerging from the base of each cloud. One such cloud enters a level in the atmosphere where the wind direction changes. You can see these wave-like patterns in the sky. Australia is the place for you if you like surfing, but not all the waves you can catch there are made of water. Near a town called Hayden, there's a mysterious wave made out of rocks. This granite formation supposedly dates back to 2.63 billion years ago. That's way before dinosaurs started hanging around the planet. Standing at 49 feet high and 360 feet long, the wave was formed as a result of two processes: weathering and erosion. There's softer sediment at the base of the wave rock, which was chemically weathered by groundwater. Winds and rain did the rest of the job, causing the erosion of the rest of the formation. Its red, yellow, and gray stripes are made of iron hydroxide, carbonates, and other chemical compounds that were washed down by the rain. You've made it to Australia, so stick around a bit more. There's one more location here that seems unreal. You'll need to fly over this one, however, if you want the best picture. In the western part of the country, surrounded by green woodlands, there's a series of lakes. They're all a staggering shade of bright pink. Out of them all, the most famous is Lake Hillier, a 2,000-foot-long reservoir. It's surrounded by both sand and a forest of eucalyptus trees. This makes the cartoon-like hue of the lake stand out even more. One of the many theories explaining the color of these mysterious lakes is connected with algae. These algae appear to gather high levels of a substance called beta-carotene, which has a red-orange pigment in it. Another explanation involves haloarchaea. Those are microorganisms that sometimes look red. Even if you don't enjoy flying, the lakes are great for taking a swim. They're not toxic, even though they have loads of salt in them. This means you'll be able to stay afloat easily, and the water won't damage your swimsuit. During winter up north in Canada, a bizarre phenomenon happens at Lake Abraham in Alberta. Underneath the frozen surface, you can spot some weird objects that look like frozen jellyfish. It's definitely not the case, as these creepy formations are just frozen methane bubbles. Those are pockets of gas that were trapped underwater and got stuck there after the lake had frozen. They appear when leaves and grass fall into the water and bacteria digest them. This process transforms them into methane. This phenomenon is as beautiful and strange as it is dangerous. The pockets of methane can easily become highly flammable. When the temperatures rise during the spring, the ice melts and these bubbles start popping and fizzing. It's a spectacular sight to observe. Picture a lake filled with soda. Remember not to bring any source of fire. It can be very dangerous for visitors. You can check out these types of lakes all across Canada's Banff National Park. Nature often tends to make its own music. Just listen to the sound of crickets at night, or the soothing noise of a waterfall. But in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, there's a strange geological phenomenon which takes nature soundtracks to a completely different level. These are called the ringing rocks, and scientists still can't explain their unusual behavior. If you strike these rocks with a heavy object, like a hammer or another rock, the stones will make a ringing sound, as if they were hollow, but they're not. What makes the ringing rocks even more bizarre, apart from the mysterious sound they make, is that no animal wants to hang around there. Even though the rocks are surrounded by a thick forest, scientists haven't managed to trace any animal activity in the area yet. Even more striking is the fact that despite all the trees around the rocks, you won't find any leaves lying on the boulders. What makes these rocks so unappealing for both animals and vegetation is still up for debate.
There are countless doors all over the world that haven't been opened for decades, and even centuries. The question is why? It seems that nowadays you can open any door you want. The truth is that some doors were sealed for a grave reason. And so far, nobody has found out what treasures and mysteries they hide. Here are 4 doors that keep their secrets all too well. The Taj Mahal. First up, we've got the Taj Mahal in India, one of the most romantic places in the world. Shah Jahan commissioned it in 1631 and dedicated it to his 3rd wife, who he loved like crazy. They were married for 19 years and had a whopping 14 kids together. But unfortunately, she passed away while giving birth to their last baby. Shah Jahan was heartbroken and decided to build an epic tomb to remember her by. The construction took a whopping 20 years to finish. The building has quite an interesting layout. The design is super unusual with these 4 massive 130-foot tall minarets that stand on the corners of a huge platform. They're not just there for looks. Back in the 17th century, architects were having some serious issues with buildings collapsing under their own weight. So, the chief architect of the Taj Mahal made sure to place those minarets as far away from the tomb as possible. And he even tilted them in a way so that if they did fall, they wouldn't wreck the rest of the Taj Mahal. Talk about planning ahead. The Taj Mahal is hiding some crazy secrets. There are sealed rooms all over the place that nobody is allowed to enter. And if you check out photos of the building from the riverside, you can spot 2 basements. But guess what? They're sealed up too. Nobody knows what's inside or why they've been locked up since the time of Shah Jahan. Apparently, there's a good reason why those rooms are off limits. Some researchers think that they were built using marble, which turns into a different substance called calcium carbonate if it's exposed to carbon dioxide. And when that happens, little bits of marble start chipping off like crazy. To make matters worse, there's no air flowing into these rooms. That means that if too much CO2 builds up in the basement, the 4 minarets could collapse. But wait, there's more. Some people think that the body of Shah Jahan's wife can be found in one of these sealed-up rooms in pristine condition. Why not? Who knows what the mysterious rooms might keep? The Great Sphinx of Giza. The Great Sphinx of Giza is shrouded in mystery. It's not just the largest monolith statue in the world, but it's also a hybrid creature with a woman's head and a lion's body that originates from Egyptian and Greek mythology. It's also very ancient. It's estimated to be around 4,500 years old. The construction of this marvel took about 3 years and required 100 workers, who were not slaves and were treated with delicacies like sheep and goat meat. It is also thought that it used to be much more massive than it is now. Archaeologists found huge stone blocks and abandoned toolkits near the site. However, the real secrets of the Sphinx lie underground, near its paws. A group of scientists used a seismograph to detect 2 hidden chambers beneath the Sphinx's paws. Some people think that these rooms might be the legendary Hall of Records, which holds ancient scrolls revealing the secrets of the universe. I mean, that's way cooler than any library I've ever been to. Rumor has it that the Egyptians even had info on Atlantis stashed down there, which is like a super old version of a conspiracy theory. Unfortunately, we can't go on an adventure to check it out just yet. The chambers presumably have 2 entrances, but both remain sealed. The researchers haven't yet received the green light to check out their theory. Let's hope they won't keep us in suspense forever. Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. This temple is located in the beautiful state of Kerala in India. This temple is famous for more than just its breathtaking beauty. Underneath the temple there are 6 vaults, creatively named A, B, C, D, E, and F. The enormous iron doors to these chambers add to the mystery of what's behind them. A few years back, the authorities decided to open these vaults to the world, but it wasn't an easy task. You can't just open the doors and enter the vaults. It required a lot of work. It took them a while, but finally, in 2011, they opened 5 of the 6 chambers. And guess what they found? Tons of treasure. Bags of gold, precious gemstones, and priceless diamond jewelry. The estimated worth of everything found in the vaults is a whopping $1 trillion. It's like the temple was the real-life inspiration for Aladdin's Cave of Wonders. But wait, I said 5 of the 6. What happened to the last one? Vault B has remained closed, but not for lack of trying. They simply didn't manage to open it. There is even a belief that it's fatally cursed. Legend says that only a saint or sage can break the curse by chanting a specific mantra. But no one has been able to do this yet, presumably because we don't have saints or sages at our disposal. There is also rumor that in the 30s some temple invaders tried to enter Vault B to do some good old looting. But they never reached their target. Apparently terrible snakes materialized out of nowhere and chased the gang away. But of course, this is just an urban legend, and there is not proof of that. However, it is said that the Auditor General dealing with the temple claimed that Vault B had been opened at least 7 times since 1990, and nothing bad happened to anyone who entered. Who knows? Maybe we should send Indiana Jones to check it out. The First Emperor's Tomb. Deep under a hill, completely undisturbed and surrounded by dangerous traps, lies an ancient 2,000-year-old tomb. It belongs to Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He was born in the Qin state and became king when he was just a boy. But when he grew up and gained full power, he united the warring states ancient China was divided into by conquering them. After that, he created the Qin dynasty. When he died in 210 BCE, they buried him deep underground in a massive tomb. And when I say massive, I mean massive! Back in 1974, some farmers in Xi'an, China, stumbled upon something strange while digging a well, a huge terracotta soldier. This discovery led to an extensive archaeological dig that has continued for over 40 years, revealing a collection of thousands of clay soldiers. The unique thing about these soldiers is that each one has its own unique features, from hairstyles to facial expressions. It's believed that there could be up to 8,000 of these soldiers, but only 2,000 have been found so far. Interestingly, the central tomb, which is believed to be the resting place of the emperor, is still untouched. In ancient records, there are references to a vast underground city that the emperor built, complete with scenic towers, palaces, and whatnot. Sima Qian, a Han Dynasty historian, wrote that the tomb was adorned with treasures and had space for hundreds of officials, but the lack of technology to properly examine the site is what's holding things up. Qin Shi Huang was surrounded by liquid mercury in his tomb, with 2 of the streams representing the major rivers of China, Yellow River and Yangtze. The ancient Chinese believed that mercury could provide immortality, but it could have also caused the emperor's death since he regularly took mercury pills to prolong his life. The dangerous levels of mercury contamination in the soil near the tomb are the main reason why scientists are reluctant to explore it. It could be very dangerous both for people and for the environment. Now, if I had to choose which door to open, I'd probably go for the one that doesn't lead to a tomb surrounded by poisonous mercury. Call me crazy, but I'd like to avoid any potential health hazards.
This hidden village is called Aogashima. It's located right in the middle of a volcanic crater. You can find it to the south of Japan, in northernmost Micronesia. The story goes that a volcano erupted in the Philippine Sea in the 1780s, causing a lot of harm to a nearby community. Half of the population managed to escape the massive eruption and came back years later to rebuild their village. At the moment, about 160 people are living there peacefully, even though the volcano is still considered to be active. Huacachina in Peru lies in one of the driest climates in the world, and still, it's a beautiful town, surrounded by lush palm trees. It also has a lagoon, which is said to have special healing properties. The settlement has a little over 90 residents that manage small businesses. Most of them use sand as their primary resource. Some offer sandboarding services or even provide luxury dinners in the desert. For over 500 years, a small group of people has been living on a cliffside of a peak called the Green Mountain. It's one of the most remote places in Oman and in the whole world. The only way to reach the settlement is on foot, by mule, or by all-terrain vehicle. It's called Al-Sogara, and you need to hike around 20 minutes up a steep stone staircase to get there. The village appeared back when the locals chiseled their houses into the mountain stone to protect themselves from storms and the cold. 5 families of the Al-Sharaki tribe still call this place home, about 25 people in total. A lot of other villages like this one can be found in the region, but Al-Sogara is special because it's the only one that is still inhabited. Up until 14 years ago, there wasn't even electricity or telephone lines here. The nearest road you could drive on was 9 miles away. Since there were no schools, people had to learn how to read and write at home from their elders. To this day, the villagers continue their traditional practice of building their homes by carving them directly into the mountain rock. One of the most beautiful Greek gems is Monemvasia, a castle town located in southeastern Peloponnese. It was designed to be invisible from the mainland for added protection. You can only see it from the sea, and to reach it, you need to follow a narrow pathway that connects it to the mainland. That's actually how its name came into being. It translates to a single passage. Monemvasia was built in the Middle Ages, exclusively carved in the mountain rock. These days, a lot of old mansions have been turned into guest houses and boutique hotels. Not only is the architecture amazing and beautifully preserved, but it's also surrounded by crystal clear waters. A town with no roads? Pack your bags for Giethoorn in the Netherlands, if you don't mind traveling by boat. The town is very peaceful, probably because everyone here travels by canals. Even the mail gets delivered by water. Since there's no car traffic and people rarely move around, the town is really quiet. So quiet that the loudest sound one can hear is the quacking of a duck every now and then. It initially started as a movie set, but Hobbiton in New Zealand still exists, even after the filming of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit was finished. Tours to the charming set town are now available. There are 44 Hobbit holes in total, though only a few of them are actually open to the public. The isolated cliffside village of Gasadalar in the Faroe Islands has a population of only 11 people. It's mostly known for its scenic waterfall, which falls directly into the Atlantic Ocean. You could only reach it on foot, hiking through the mountains not so long ago. However, a tunnel has been constructed recently, making the place easily accessible by car. The 1980s musical Popeye had a custom set built on Malta. It wasn't taken down after the filming had been finished, and Popeye Village is now home to groups of beautifully colored wooden buildings and a company of actors. There's a lot of fun stuff to do there, like watch theater shows, go on boat rides, visit museums, or simply explore the creative village. The oldest and most photographed village in Austria is called Hallstatt. It's a hidden European gem with beautifully preserved old buildings and a subterranean salt lake. It's also home to a museum with artifacts as old as 7,000 years and the world's oldest salt mine. Fort Bortange in the Netherlands is a small establishment shaped like a star. Creative parts aside, it was built this way for defensive purposes. It gave the guards of the fort a strategic advantage because they had a perfect 360-degree view. These days, the construction is perfectly preserved, including its old buildings, cobblestone streets, wooden windmills, and sophisticated bridges. In Morocco, there's a traditional earthen village made entirely from clay bricks. You can find it in a valley close to the Atlas Mountains, 32 miles from the capital of Morocco. Merchants who followed the trans-Saharan trade route went through this town, carrying spices and gold. As the trade route became less and less popular, many of these fortresses were abandoned, and are now preserved relics. It's one of the best places for skiing in the world, but it's still hidden from the public. No wonder the locals call it the secret side of the valley. Located in Austria, the tiny village of Warth has only a couple hundred inhabitants. Not only is it the snowiest village on Earth, but it also has access to one of the biggest ski slopes in the world. Its popularity increased a bit in 2013 when the construction of a high-speed road was completed nearby. Virano in Italy is one of the most colorful islands in the world. Because of its vibrant colors, it almost looks tropical. It features emerald green waters, beautiful houses, and a 17th century bell tower. Its lace-making tradition brought Leonardo da Vinci to the island back in the 1400s. He bought a piece of cloth there and later used it for the design of the famous Dome of Milan. If you have a UK passport, you must be familiar with the beautiful small town of Bibury, as its scenery is featured in your ID. It's surely one of the most charming towns in Europe, as it's made up of stone buildings standing on the River Colne. The image in the UK passports is that of Arlington Row, a line of weavers' cottages that date back to the 14th century. The town of Coober Pedy in Australia is partially underground. It all began back in 1915, when opal deposits were found in the area. To this day, the town is still the biggest opal mine in the world. People living there figured out that it would be more comfortable for them to stick to the underground, as the temperatures outside can reach 125 degrees Fahrenheit. So, the settlement now has underground stores and galleries. Coober Pedy is also home to the world's first 4-star underground hotel. To visit the most remote location in the whole world, you'll need to prepare yourself for quite a journey. If you're traveling from the United States, for example, the easiest route is a 15-hour-long flight to Cape Town, South Africa, followed by a 6-day boat ride. Only after that will you reach Tristan da Cunha. Or you can take a month-long cruise across the South Atlantic Ocean, whatever works better for you. Planning in advance is a must, since there are only 9 boat trips to the island yearly. The island itself is just 7 miles long. Sitting right in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, it covers a mere 37.8 square miles. The 300 residents are all farmers. They have the internet, but it's really slow. As for a phone network or a local newspaper, neither is available. The inhabitants of the island speak a dialect of English that is used by the smallest number of people in the world.